I hope you enjoyed that. Another tale of karma from the dark city. I always point out to young people watching films from this era, once I convince them that black and white won't make them go blind, that back in the day, all films were essentially G-rated. The job of the Production Code Administration was to ensure that anyone of any age could go to the movies at any time and not be embarrassed. I can only imagine some nice married couple taking little Billy and Joni to the Bijou where this movie was playing. Daddy, isn't somebody getting killed? Why is that lady so excited? Well, Joni, some people have what's called a sadomasochistic impulse. You'll learn all about that someday. Yes, Joni, that's why I married your father. Director Henry Levin began his show business career as an actor, which led to his being used by Columbia in the early 40s as a dialogue director, which in those days could be a track to the director's chair. Levin really didn't have a knack for noir, as his natural tendency, this film notwithstanding, was to play things lightly. For the 1949 film Mr. Soft Touch, starring Glenn Ford and Evelyn Keyes, Columbia used two directors, Gordon Douglas for the tough, action-packed parts, and Levin for the romantic comedy passages. Although he never developed any discernible style, Levin was a reliable workhorse who continued making feature films into the 1970s, long after most of his 1940s colleagues had permanently switched to television. Now, you may have noticed that two cameramen are credited here as directors of photography, Philip Tanura and Burnett Guffey. Now, Tanura was the veteran, having shot pictures since the silent days. Guffey had only been working at the B unit in Columbia for a few years, but he was about to begin a run of films that made him the studio's premier director of photography. Guffey provided striking visuals for some of Columbia's best noir films, as well as such all-time classics as From Here to Eternity, The Birdman of Alcatraz, and Bonnie and Clyde. I'm assuming that Guffey shot the majority of Night Editor, while Tanura handled the framing scenes in the newspaper office. William Gargan looked pretty comfortable playing a detective, which makes sense since it's what he spent most of the 1940s doing. He played Ellery Queen 3 times in Columbia's B-movie series based on the famous detective. On radio, he played Barry Craig, confidential investigator. And on radio and television, he was Martin Caine, private eye. Call it typecasting because Gargan actually was a private detective in his native New York before becoming an actor. He also made a living selling bootleg whiskey to Manhattan speakeasies during Prohibition. Gargan's meal ticket was his distinctive voice, so it was cruel irony when he lost that voice to throat cancer in the late 1950s, ending his acting career. Now, as for Janice Carter, this film launched her into starring roles at Columbia, like her next picture, Framed, where she played exactly the same character, albeit in a A-budget film opposite Glenn Ford. Although she aspired to be a musical performer, she'd even auditioned for the Metropolitan Opera, Carter was quickly typecast in pictures as the alluring and dangerous other woman. When she arrived at Columbia in the early 1940s, she instantly became a rival to stablemate Ann Savage, who'd pretty much carved out the other woman territory for herself. But Columbia doubled down on Carter and dropped Ann Savage's contract, which led the actress to accept an offer to star in a grimy little Poverty Row B called Detour. Funny how these things work out. Janice Carter retired from movies in the early 50s, tired of the typecasting. She moved to New York, married businessman Jules Stuhlman, and moved into a Manhattan high-rise, where her neighbor was Ann Savage, who'd also abandoned Hollywood in the 1950s. And guess who lived around the corner? Jeff Donnell, who'd returned to New York stages in the hopes of getting roles other than the cute, sensible wife. The three became lifelong friends. When I knew Ann Savage, a framed photo of Janice Carter held a place of honor on her bedroom vanity. Well, that's it for this week. Be sure to keep up with us on the Noir Alley Facebook page and Twitter feed, and come back next weekend for more abominable behavior from really good-looking people. I'll be presenting Zachary Scott in one of his signature roles as lady killer Ronnie Mason and Danger Signal, a 1945 offering from Warner Brothers, directed by Robert Florey and photographed by the great James Wong Howe. Till then, see you in the shadows.